Hi, everyone. Welcome to another live Q&A with me. My name is Shakina, and I'm from the education team. I'm here for the next 60 minutes to answer all of your OET questions live. So the format of the session is really simple today. Um, I have 60 minutes with you. And if you've got a question, you can post it into um, Facebook to the comment section or on YouTube to the comment section there. That question will come to me, and I'll do my best to answer as many questions as possible in the next 60 minutes. Now, there's no silly questions. We love hearing all of your questions. So whether that question is about reading, listening, speaking, writing, so any of the subtests, or if it's a question you have in general about preparation, maybe there's an aspect of the test that you've been wondering about. So any kind of question is absolutely welcome. And as I said, we love hearing your questions. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of time to put in your questions. I can see a couple have come through already. And let's begin with one question here that I have from Mohammed, who's joined us on YouTube. So Mohammed saying, which is easy, OET on computer or paper? So Mohammed, um, both types, so both OET and on computer and OET on paper have the same difficulty level. OET is a standardized test, so the parts of the test, the format, the timing, the questions, the types of tasks that you have are all the same in terms of their difficulty. Now, which one you choose to take is ultimately a choice that you make based on your preferences. And what we suggest is that if you're someone who feels very comfortable with uh, uh, computers, with typing, with navigating your way around a screen, then OET on computer could be the best choice for you. If you're someone who's more, uh, who likes paper-based writing things, holding something in your hands as you read it, then perhaps, and of course, writing with a pen or a pencil, you're more comfortable and you can write faster there. Then OET on paper is perhaps going to be the more comfortable choice for you. So it really depends on which you prefer. One thing that we would say is whichever one you choose, it's very important to, although you might be very comfortable with that format, to be practicing the test in test conditions using official sample tests. So I'm going to put in the link to our official sample tests page, and you have on there, you can choose to take sample tests, paper-based sample tests, or computer-based sample tests. So it's important that you get familiar with doing a real sample test in test conditions as you practice. So just keep that in mind, whichever one you decide to go for, to make sure that you practice in that format. All right, so I've got a question here from Sharon Matthew, and Sharon joins us on YouTube. Sharon's asking, what are the common words that come in listening part A? So if you think about it, listening part A is a consultation between a healthcare professional and a patient. The consultation or the speciality can be from any of the 12 OET professions. And the idea of listening part A is that you complete the notes the healthcare professional has made while listening to the conversation or the consultation. Now, if you think about it, a consultation, what happens in a consultation? And what are the kinds of things that you would hear? Those are the common words that would come in listening part A. So there isn't a list, but like I said, try and think about what happens. The healthcare professional asks the patient how they're feeling, what something about their symptoms, perhaps ask them about what kind of remedies they've taken, what triggers, what things have made their symptoms worse or better. And all of these are the kinds of things that you would listen to in listening part A. You have 30 seconds reading time. And during that time is really when you begin to actively think about what you're going to listen to, or anticipate what you're going to listen to. There are lots of things there that can help you. You have the context sentence at the beginning, which will tell you, what you tell you the patient's name, tell you what profession they're speaking to, what the problem is. And then you have the notes. So you have the completed notes, and then you also have headings there, and you have incomplete notes that you have to fill. The headings will give you the flow of the conversation, so those are really helpful also to help your brain activate its background knowledge of the kinds of things that you could hear in what's coming up. The idea is not to guess exactly those words, but just in that reading time to start thinking about those kinds of things, so you are prepared to listen when the audio starts. All right. And as I just said a little earlier, I'm going to put in the sample tests page. So I'm just putting that in to chat right now. And that's where you will find all of the sample tests that we have, both computer-based and paper-based. All right. Let's continue. Okay, so I've got a question here from Maywish, and Maywish joins us on YouTube. Maywish is saying, "Hi, ma'am. I have an issue in reading part B and part C. Please, can you tell me how I can improve both?" Okay, Maywish, I'm going to put up a set of tips, which are going to be for reading part C, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can apply those tips to part B. So I just put your question off there for a second and bring up my tips here. So with reading part C, you have, for both parts B and C, you have 45 minutes between those parts to complete. Now, the idea is that you split your time between part B and part C, with part B giving part B about 10 to 12 minutes. And that leaves you about 35 minutes to do part C. Part C has two passages. Um, you've got two passages, as I said, and um, you've if you can split your time to be about 15 to 17 minutes with each of the passages, you're in a good you're in a good spot. So practicing with that is a good idea, and sort of managing your time that way. With part C, and of course with part B as well, you need to engage with the text and find evidence for all of the options that are there, all of the answer options. Now, what do I mean by this? Um, it's very easy to get distracted by the answer options. And so when you begin a question, focus on the question and go to the text. Um, when you go to the text, try and engage with that. As you can see, that's the third tip there. And find why that. So try and find the answer to the question without looking at the answer options. Now, what this does is it gives you, helps you to formulate in your own mind what the answer is and have a good understanding of what the text says. When you have that understanding, you can go to the answer options and you'll feel more confident about which one to choose. When you do choose the one that you think is the answer, um, that's great, but don't stop there. You also need to find evidence from the text for why the other options are incorrect. And that will be there in the text. And so, using this technique, you'll find that you can gain more confidence about selecting the right answer. Now, this technique is something that you can use in both part B and in part C. We call this the QTA method, which is the question text answer options method, which is you focus on the question and the text first before looking at the answer options. I'm also going to put into the chat our complete guide to reading part C, and you'll see in this complete guide there's lots of tips. And at the end of it, you'll also find the guides to part A and part B as well. So do check out the complete guide to reading part C. Okay, so back to our questions. And I've seen quite a few have come, and welcome to all of you joining. I'm going to pick up this question from Prema about writing. Prema's asking, is there any strict format to start an OET letter? For example, I'm writing to refer. Is it acceptable? So, Prerna, actually, there is no strict format, and we actually discourage the use of a strict format or templates, as we like to call them. We don't encourage the use of templates. And definitely, what you would need to do is to make sure that your introduction focuses on communicating to the reader why you are writing to them. That is perhaps the most important rule for you to remember in terms of writing or starting your letter. So yes, you can use phrases, definitely, like I'm writing to refer, or this patient is being discharged today, whatever the patient's name is. All of those ways, those phrases are acceptable. There's a lot more that you can use, but oftentimes candidates stick to a few and think that there is no way to go outside of these phrases. But remember that as long as your message is clear, and as long as it's in correct English, you can begin your letter in any way that communicates the purpose for writing clearly. I'm going to put into the chat now our writing guide. Writing guide is an excellent resource for you to really understand what we're looking for in an introduction, and this is covered under the chapter which is the purpose criterion. That chapter is something that I would encourage you to look at, because that gives you a really good idea of what the assessors are looking for. They're not looking for a template. They're not looking for you to be following a strict format or using particular phrases. They're looking for how you are communicating the information to the reader about why this letter is being written. So uh, just give me a second while I put in the writing guide, and just going to put that into the chat now. That should be coming through. All right. So I've got another question. On writing from 7x on YouTube, saying when we're writing body paragraphs, what tense do we write in? So when you're writing your letter, you might use a variety of tenses. There is no one single tense, or two tenses, or three tenses. You need to use a variety of tenses that communicate the meaning of when that event happened, or when that or tells you something about the truth of um, that sentence, or it's a fact, for example. You need to use the tense that conveys meaning accurately. There's no one single tense that is used. We've got an excellent article on tenses on in our blog, and so I'm going to put that into chat which will give you a little bit more information on that. All right, I'm going to pick up a question from Shahem on YouTube, joining us on YouTube, saying, my level is B1 and I want to get a B in OET. Uh, do you know how many days I'd need to get this to this level if I want to study 3 hours every day? So, Shaham, that's a great question. And there's a lot of work that you've already done, which is excellent. First of all, you've found out what your level of English is, which is really excellent. And then you've also found out what your target level or what your desired score is, which is in your case a B. And I assume that's a B in all four subtests in OET. So those are both really important pieces of information that you need to know, is what is my level right now and where do I want to get to. Now, how many days you will take to achieve that? And again, you've identified really wonderfully that you have about 3 hours every day to study. Make sure that the 3 hours is a realistic amount of time. You need to keep aside time for your life. If you've got your family commitments, you've got other things, leisure, sleep, exercise, all of those things need to fit into your daily schedule. Of course, if you're working, that also needs to be accounted for, and that 3 hours needs to be a realistic amount of time. So a lot of great things that you've already identified. And how long it really how long it would take to reach the OET-B level um, is something that again depends on how much time you have available to study every day. I'm going to put into chat right now um, a link to our study with a teacher page, which is a list of our best preparation partners who are going to give you a bit more information. And like I said, it is, like I've just talked about, it is something that is a little bit more personalized, in the sense it does depend on how much time you have available to study, and where you are in your at your level of English. So I'm going to put into the chat a list of our preparation partners, and I would highly recommend contacting them. They're going to be able to give you advice on how to improve your English to be able to reach that level that you need. And they're also going to be able to help you understand how long that could take. And like I said, it would be a course of study. So that they'd be able to give you the best advice on that. I'm just going to put that into chat right now. All right, I've got a question here from Sujat, who joins us on YouTube, saying, hi, will spelling errors lead to a loss of marks in the listening test? So, yes, spelling errors could lead to a loss of marks in the listening test. Of course, there is a bit more flexibility in listening part A than in reading part A. You know that in reading part A, you have to have 100% accurate spelling. Like I said, there is a bit more flexibility with listening part A, but you are expected to spell with 100% accuracy words that are commonly known to both healthcare professionals and to the lay public. So, common words like cholesterol, protein, these words are you are expected to spell 100% correctly. So make sure that you don't neglect your spelling in your preparation. Make sure that you pay attention to spellings, especially if you know that there's an area or type of word that you are repeatedly making mistakes with. Make sure you practice that well, and you're aware of that and you practice that. Okay, I've got a question here from Kampa, who joins us on YouTube, saying, "What if I fail OAT in my first attempt?" So, of course, we're sure you're studying really hard and spending a lot of time preparing to ensure that you pass OET in your first attempt. And in fact, that is something that we wish for all candidates, is to be able to pass OET in their first attempt. Now, if you do find that you fail, or even if you haven't attempted OET, this is a really good question to ask, because it'll help you understand how you can prepare. So, there are essentially two types of skills that you need to succeed at OET. You need test taking skills and you need language skills. OET is not a test of your medical knowledge, so you don't need medical knowledge. Now, with test taking skills, what are they? Test taking skills are your are how good you are at taking a test, and specifically in the case of OET, how familiar are you with the format? How good are you in managing time in the reading section, for example, or in the writing section? Um, how good are you at answering multiple choice questions? Those are your test taking skills. So, time management, your awareness of the format, your ability to answer question multiple choice questions in a pressured test environment. Those are your test taking skills. The other aspect are your language skills, and your language skills are your listening, reading, writing skills, your grammar, your vocabulary, that are the building blocks of OET, of language. So you've got to have both, right? And if you find that you failed in your first attempt, or even, like I said, as you're preparing now, think about yourself. Which sort of skill do you need to improve in? Is it test taking skills or your language skills, or is it both? Um, and and then think about which areas of the test you need to improve your skills in. It's a good idea to reflect and think about your strengths and weaknesses if you haven't achieved the result you desire. And then, like I said, identify the type of skill and make a plan towards working and improving those skills. Often that could mean taking a step back from doing more practice tests, or even taking a bit of a step back before booking your next test, to make sure that you've worked on those skills, and then attempt another practice test. So that would be our advice, is to do a little bit of reflection, think about what kind of skills you need to work on, and then make a plan based on that before you attempt the test again. All right. Okay, I'm just looking for some newer questions, and quite a few questions that have come in. Thank you for all your questions. And if you've just joined us, as I said a little bit earlier, the format is really simple. If you've got a question, just type it into the comment section where you are, and that'll come through to me. Um, I've got a question here from Manuval, who joins us on YouTube, saying, "How do you eliminate contradictions? um, or distractors. I'm going to read that as distractors, or incorrect answer options in part B and C. How do you do that easily? So, with parts B and C, you need to think about the text. Really, you need to put the text first. Often, what happens is you might get carried away by the answer options and focus on those too much. So, a good approach is to read the question and then go to the text and try and answer the question in your own words after you've read the text. So don't look at the answer options at all. Cover them up with a piece of paper or cover them up with your hand, and try and answer the question on your own first. And then go to the answer options and make your selection. When you've made your selection of the right answer, the other thing to also do is to find evidence from the options, from the text about why the other options are incorrect. So make sure you find the evidence from the text. Make sure it's really there in the text. Don't dismiss it, or don't dismiss an option. Like I said, make sure you go back to the text. And this might take a bit of time in the beginning for you to do, but as with time, you'll get quicker, and this will be something that your brain can do almost sort of, as you're reading, and it will take less time. So that would be a good tip for how you can eliminate or rule out distractors in reading parts B and C. Okay, I've got a question here from Rekha, who joins us on YouTube. And Rekha's asking, how do you clear reading? How do you pass reading? So I'm going to recommend our Reading Week playlist, which is an excellent set of 5 videos that go through each part of the reading test with skills and strategies, but also offer there are also 2 videos that offer excellent advice on how you can incorporate reading into your daily routine and the kinds of skills that you need, and you need to be good at to pass reading. So I'm going to put that into the chat. That's our Reading Week playlist. It is on YouTube. Um, and what I would say is, just to pick out something from that reading week, it's a good idea, of course, to work um, on your on the parts of each part of the test, your part A, part B, part C. But as you are practicing your sample tests, as you're building your vocabulary, it's also a good idea to do that kind of reading, the kind of reading that is expected in each part of the test, reading more real life material. Um, that is from those reading contexts. Now, what do I mean? With reading part A, you read dosage charts, you have treatment pathways. Those are the things that you encounter in part A. So reading more of those in that quick way, of when you're trying to look for information. With reading part B, you read memos, emails, policy documents, guidelines. Those are the kinds of workplace communication that that's there in part B. So focusing on reading a bit more of that, outside of OET practice tests, outside of a sample test, that is a really good way to build your skills of reading and becoming familiar with that kind of text. And then with reading part C, you've got articles which are on topics of general medical interest, usually developments in a field of medicine, and developments or case studies. Those are the kinds of things that you would read in part C. So again, working on that, on improving that, or including more of that reading in your everyday life is going to be really helpful to be able for you to be able to build your reading skills sort of more holistically, um, um, aside from just your practice tests. And I'm going to put into um, chat now our a link to our study guide. Now, our study guide has lots of recommendations for exactly more of the kinds of reading that more resources for the kinds of reading that I've just mentioned. So I'm putting into chat our reading week playlist that I mentioned, and then of course our study guide as well. Right. All right. So I've got a question um, here from Manuval, again joining us on YouTube, saying, "How do you write a letter properly with the relevant information and then proper segregation or organization?" Um, so, our top tip here is to keep your reader front of mind while you're selecting case notes, while you're reading the case notes, and while you're considering how to organize your letter. The reader, the person you're writing to, is going to be making important medical decisions based on the information given in your letter. They're going to be continuing care for your patient based on the information you provide. And they're going to really depend on your letter being accurate, being precise, and including whatever is needed for them to continue care. For them to get a good idea of that. So keep the reader in mind and remember that they're going to be making decisions based on the information in your letter. So that is how you would approach the letter. It's about your reader. Now, there's the excellent writing guide that I shared a little bit earlier in chat, and I'm going to just reshare that. That guide takes you through uh, the the criteria, the writing criteria, and specifically the content criterion that's going to help you understand how to select case notes, and then of course the organization and layout criterion, which is the next part of your question about proper segregation of information and proper organization of information. So check out the writing guide, and specifically those two chapters on those two criteria that I've just mentioned. Okay, I've got a question here from 7x on YouTube asking, in speaking, if we're talking with the parents of a child, then is it necessary to ask the child's name? No, it's absolutely not necessary. You can assume a name for the child, and continue the conversation with the interlocutor. The interlocutor will accept that name and continue the conversation. Right. So I'm just looking for a few, for any newer questions that have come up. And I'm going to put up this question here from Mrs. Everest on YouTube saying, what's the criteria for scoring in letter writing? And I'm going to actually share my screen in a second to tell you a little bit about the writing criteria, the writing assessment criteria, and how they work, what they are, and how they work. So just hiding your question there and going to share my screen. Um, which hopefully you should be able to see right now. So as you can see, and this is the writing criteria. Um, this document is available on our website, on our writing page, and I'm going to put a link to it in the chat once I finish. So the writing criteria, there are six. So you've got purpose, content, conciseness and clarity, genre and style, organization and layout, and language. Each of the criteria are marked from 0 to 7, except purpose, which is 0 to 3. Now, what does this mean? What does it mean they're marked from 0 to 3 or 0 to 7? What the assessors are doing is they're looking at your performance and mapping it to the descriptors that you can see here. So they're looking your at the descriptors and like I said, matching your performance. They are trained to be able to do this, so they undergo rigorous training, and of course they're monitored as they in the process. What is important for you to remember is to understand that yes, you are being assessed against this criteria. These are the bands, or these are the scores that you could get, and you need to be able to identify what the specific things are in this criteria that the assessors are looking for as evidence of a good letter, strengths of a good letter. And this is something that you can find in our writing guide that I've shared. It's on our writing page. That's on our website. And another resource that you can make use of is our graded sample booklets. And the graded sample booklets are excellent tools to help you understand where they basically contain 30 assessed samples of writing from real candidates, um, and they go through the assessor in the sample booklets. Of course, there's a grade given to each letter, and there are assessor comments that praise the strengths and also highlight some of the weaknesses based on the criteria that I showed you. So reading the criteria is important. Understanding what the assessors are looking for, the writing guide can help with that. And then you can see some real examples of how this works out in letters using our graded sample booklets. And I'm just putting the link to the graded sample booklets um, in chat as well. And these are all resources that are on our Ready page. If you want to, if you've missed the link and you want to search for them, you can go to the search bar and just type in what you're looking for. They usually do come up. Right. So you've got the graded sample booklets there in chat, and I'm going to put in the link to our writing page, which has the assessment criteria. Okay, I've got a question here from 7x, asking in when you're filling your answers in or shading your answers, and I'm assuming this is for reading part and listen, for your reading and listening tests where you're answering the multiple choice questions. If some portions get shaded beyond the circle, then will it be marked as wrong? Yes, possibly. If the computer isn't able to read your selection, then obviously you wouldn't get marks for that. So it's important to make sure that you shade in the lozenge or the circle with a 2B pencil, and you do that clearly. Make sure there is a little bit of a margin around uh, these circles, and that you've not written anything too close to them or made any other marking too close to them. If you want to, rule out answer options, you want to put a tick or a cross, make sure you do it on the other side of the answer options so that that area around the circles is clear. And when you do shade in the circle that is your final choice of answer, that the computer is able to read it easily. All right, I've got a question here from Juntima on Facebook saying, can you suggest about improving listening skills? So, with listening, it's a good idea to think about the kinds of listening that you do in OET and practice more of that listening in your everyday life and build it into your routine. So, what are the kinds of things that you'd listen to in OET? In part A, you listen to healthcare professional and patient consultations. So, healthcare professional talking to a patient, um, and these are the kinds of things that you would hear every day, when you are in a working environment, so that listening to more of those kinds of real life consultations is a really good way to build that um, familiarity with that kind of interaction. um, the second part B is workplace more workplace interactions that you would hear on the ward. So you can have safety briefings, handovers, you have feedback sessions between colleagues, sometimes a patient talking to a healthcare professional talking to a patient. All of those are everyday conversations that you would hear in the workplace. And again, listening to more of these kinds of conversations is a really great idea. And then finally, with listening part C, you have the kind of listening that you would do to improve your knowledge or to upgrade your profession, to upgrade your professional knowledge of your field. So, interviews with experts, presentations by experts, fellow healthcare professionals who've done some research or have found the kinds of things you would listen to in parts. So think about each part, what you're going to listen to in each part, and pick things that will help you, that are basically these all of these examples in real life. I'm going to give you an excellent resource that is going to give you recommendations for each part. where to find, how to listen to each, where to find more of the kinds of things you would listen to in each part. And that is our listening week playlist. um, our listening week playlist is available on YouTube. So if you go to our channel and type in listening week playlist, that should come up. uh, but I am posting it here in the chat as well. All right, so I've got uh, just looking for some newer questions. And I've got a question here from Rogelio on YouTube saying, could you please also share the criteria for speaking? Yes, absolutely. Um, the criteria for speaking is available on our website, on our speaking page, which you'll find in the ready section of the website. Now, I'm going to share my screen and just talk about the criteria in brief, and also share two resources that are going to help you and demystify or break down some of the things in the criteria a bit more. So let me just share my screen. So again, the document that you see is on our speaking page. This is the speaking assessment criteria. There are two kinds of criteria. So the first is the linguistic criteria. And I'm just going to scroll down. And the second one is the clinical communication criteria. These are the two criteria that the assessors are going to use when marking your role play. The first, the linguistic criteria, there are four, which is, you can see, intelligibility, fluency, appropriateness of language, and the last is resources of grammar and expression. Um, these linguistic criteria marked from 0 to 6, and they assess, very broadly speaking, each one is very specific, but just for the sake of explanation, each one, they broadly assess your language. So they assess, how good your fluency is, how good, that's the fluency criteria, obviously. How good you are with your control over grammar and vocabulary, how well is your pronunciation easily understood, how you can explain terms, medical terms and technical terms to lay people, your patients. All of these are covered under the linguistic criteria. Now, coming down to the clinical communication criteria, there are five. So they are relationship building, understanding and incorporating the patient's perspective, providing structure, information gathering, and information giving. These are very, like I did for linguistic criteria, just very broadly, these are your clinical communication skills. These are skills, sort of, that assess how you communicate in a way that is patient centered, that puts your patient first. So, for example, how good are you at actively listening to the patient so that the patient willingly gives you more information about their problem and shares information with you? How good you are at empathizing with the patient, so that, again, they open up and share information with you. How well you can give information to your patient and explain something that they need to understand. So these are all that these are all the kinds of skills that you would need to demonstrate when to the assessors when we're thinking about the clinical communication criteria. So those are the two kinds, sets of criteria. And I'm going to share our speaking guides. There are two. So you have your linguistic speaking guide for linguists for the linguistic criteria, and speaking guide for the clinical communication criteria. And you'll find both of these on our speaking page, which is in our ready section. And I am just going to put in to the chat a link to the guides. And these guides have simple explanations, but they also have really good examples of how someone has demonstrated these criteria. All right, I'm just looking for a few questions that might have come in the last few minutes. All right. So I've got a question here from Salma on YouTube saying, what questions do you advise we ask the interlocutor prior to the role play? So in your speaking test, you have um, different stages. So in the first sort of section of the speaking test, you'll have some warm-up questions. Those questions are not assessed. And those questions are there just for you to and the interlocutor to become familiar with each other's voices. The questions are asked by the interlocutor, and you answer those questions. There is no correct way to answer those questions. You answer them just like you would, you know, just like answer them in any way you like. The next section is, of course, when you get your roll card, you have 3 minutes preparation time. And I think, Salma, that is what your question is about. What questions do you advise asking the interlocutor in this 3 minutes preparation time? Remember, you are allowed to ask questions. We don't advise that you don't have to ask questions during this 3 minutes if you don't have any questions. That 3 minutes can be simply time spent for you quietly, for you to prepare and to think about your role play. If you ask the interlocutor is not going to be assessing your speaking. So again, they're not going to, for example, you might be under the impression if I ask them some questions, it'll feel like I'm really, they might think I'm really, keen on doing well in the role play, or I understand parts of the role play really well. um, so they are not remember, they're not assessing your speaking. So you don't need to ask them questions if you don't have any questions. If you do have a question, for example, about a vocabulary item, for example, you could ask them. You could ask them how, for example, if how they want to be addressed. You could ask them that, but it is really not necessary. And remember that, for example, if you ask them something about a medical term, they may not be able to answer that because they are not medical professionals. Right. I've got a question here from Mrs. Everest on YouTube saying, "Will you be penalized if you're not able to finish the tasks before the time frame?" So you will not be penalized if you're not able to finish all of the tasks on the roll card. The tasks on the roll card are there for, to give structure to your conversation. They are there and designed in a way that you will be able to finish a conversation within 5 minutes in a logical sort of structure. But it is not compulsory to finish all of those tasks in the 5 minutes. When it could become a problem is if you have really gone away from the topic, and the kind of the structure there, and you've really sort of gone, like I said, far away from the topic. um, so that's when it could possibly become a problem. And then again, like we spoke about earlier, the assessors are using the assessment criteria to judge all of the speaking that you do in those 5 minutes. So don't worry if you can't finish all of the tasks. Focus on the conversation, focus on the patient, and demonstrating the skills in the clinical communication criteria, and making sure your language is clear, and you and the patient are able to communicate well. Okay, I've got a question here from Kushella on Facebook, asking, could you tell us more or explain more on question answer text in reading? So this is a method that I referred to a little bit earlier, strategy, I think, which is um, I referred to the question, text, and answer options strategy, which is you read the question first and understand the question, and then you go to the text and try and answer the question uh, using your own words, looking at the text only. Don't look at the answer options. Cover them up with a piece of paper or with your hand and focus on just the question and the text. Once you've been able to answer the question in your own words in your head, um, or while you're practicing, you could even jot it down. Then look at the answer options, and you'll be able to make your choice more confidently. And then once you look at the answer options, you've selected the answer you think is right. Look for evidence from the text for why that is the correct answer, and look for evidence from the text for why the other answers are incorrect. All right, so we're down to the last 2 minutes. I'm going to see if I can find a one final question. Um, just uh, all right. I think we've covered most of, or almost all of, the questions there, which is great. I'm going to talk about our next session, which is going to be in 2 weeks' time, which is the same time, uh, Tuesday, July 29th, on all of those times that you see displayed there on the screen. So if you've got another question you'd like us to ask, or if you have someone who wants a question answered, send them along to the session, share our YouTube channel with them, and they'll be notified when they subscribe of when we're going to go live next, which is in for the Q&A session. It's Tuesday 29th of July. Remember that you can also contact us on Facebook, on Facebook Messenger, if you've got any questions, and pop in your question there, and we will do our best to get back to you within 24 hours. So it was lovely as always answering your questions today. Until next time, bye for now.